here with Free to Feed. It is my honor and pleasure to get to introduce you to the newest member of the Free to Feed family, and specifically someone who is going to be here working alongside our team in order to help fellow food allergy families. And so not only is she an expert in her field, which she's going to dive into, but a food allergy warrior herself, which is incredibly important to me and to those who we are serving. So Shoshana, could you please introduce yourself to our listeners and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Of course. Hi, my name is Shoshana. First, I really just need to thank Free to Feed for helping me get here. I, as Trill mentioned, am a food allergy warrior myself and also have a little as a food allergy infant. And I don't think we would have been able to get to where we are today with him, happy, healthy, without the help of Free to Feed. So first, thank you so much. I am a registered dietitian. I'm a certified lactation consultant. I have celiac disease, which means that I cannot eat gluten. And I have a little who had a dairy allergy as an infant. So that's like quick snapshot background. On my kind of path to becoming a registered dietitian wasn't really like where I expected to go with my life. I was headed in a totally different direction. I accidentally took a nutrition class in college thinking that it would fulfill a prerequisite for something, and it didn't, and I fell in love. So I changed my major, went into a program for nutrition dietetics at Queens College in New York. And as I took more and more classes, fell deeper and deeper in love. And the goal of this major in nutrition dietetics is to become a registered dietitian. And part of the process to getting your internship, which is part of the process to becoming a registered dietitian, you have to do a significant chunk of hours of volunteer work. And I was looking around in my neighborhood, didn't really find anything that was so interesting to me. And the program director at the time said to me, well, why don't you, reach out to a local WIC center? So I reached out to a few and they were like, oh, we're not taking volunteers at this time. And I was like, you know what? There's one 20 minutes from my house. I'm just going to drive there. I went with my resume, got all dressed up, did my hair, did my makeup, fine, walked in, and they were like, wow, like you walked in with your resume. This is super cool. Sure, you can volunteer with us. So I went in thinking I was going to be volunteering, taking weights of children, measuring heights and weights, things like that. And in the end, they kind of had me more doing the lactation aspect of WIC, and I became fully obsessed with lactation. I ran as a volunteer their whole World Breastfeeding Week for 2019. And my love for lactation just grew and grew and grew. And I eventually, during COVID lockdown, got my certification as a lactation counselor, a CLC. And then went on to do my dietetic internship, where I specialized very much in pediatrics. I worked many, many weeks in a children's hospital doing NICU, pediatric ICU, general floors. I worked in outpatient clinics, outpatient allergy, outpatient genetics, outpatient weight management. So I really got the full training in pediatric nutrition. Then right after my internship, I took my RD exam, passed, got my registered dietitian certification. And then I had a baby and everything was going great. Day one in the hospital, I was like, okay, cool. I'm a CLC, I'm a dietitian, I got this. And then I didn't. And it was miserable. And I said in the hospital, I was like, I need to speak with the lactation consultant. Baby's not latching. They're like, no, it's just day one. You're a new mom, baby's sleepy, you'll figure it out. And I was like, no, something's wrong. I asked for lactation consultants come 4 times, 5 times, 6 times, didn't come. And because it was COVID, I was only in the hospital 24 hours after I had the baby. So like 2 minutes before I was discharged, the lactation consultant finally came in and she was like, I don't think he has a tongue tie, but like, here's a nipple shield. Have fun. And I was like, okay, cool. So I went home and I was like, okay, but now we took him to the doctor the next day. He lost 10% of body weight in 24 hours. So like he was not getting food. And he was sleepy and like crying and like just not a happy baby. And I had been saying from when he started having trouble latching, like, I think he has a tongue tie. And no one was listening to me. You're a first-time mom. Like, no, fine. 6 weeks later, finally got a referral to take him to see an ENT, who diagnosed him with a tongue tie, and then was like, oh, but like, it's fine. It's only going to affect breastfeeding. Like, it's minor. Just don't do anything about it. So we didn't. And I'm very sad about it because that meant that I never got to feed at the breast. But I exclusively pumped for 5+ months. Yeah. And then in the middle of this exclusive pumping journey, which is hard enough as it is, and my, celiac, so not eating gluten, baby also started having food allergy symptoms. And he wasn't pooping and he was crying and he was not happy unless he was being held and he wasn't sleeping and yada, yada, yada. And eventually I was like, you know what, like, from what I saw in the allergy clinic and what I saw, through my lactation training, like, we know he's not having a latch issue because he's not latching. So let's like try eliminating dairy and see how that goes. Beautiful. 3 days later, totally resolved. Amazing. But then we were like, shoot, we're on this gluten-free, dairy-free diet. What do we eat? So that's kind of where Annie came in, and helped me navigate foods that I could eat, and then also reintroduction. So thank God now we have a beautiful 1.5-year-old who is allergy-free, eating all of the things. But that's kind of how I got here. I, was so thankful to Annie and to Free to Feed and all the free information and content on Instagram and on your website and all of those things that I was like, I have to, reach out and see if I can give back in some way. And I'm so excited to be here and to be able to help other families and other moms navigate similar journeys.
Yes. First, huge kudos to you for navigating all of that. What a journey, and what's like both fascinating, bittersweet, awful, all of the above, is that like your journey is one that we've heard several times, many times. And that is one, it's in a way, it's so wonderful to hear someone else to know that we're not alone, and also be incredibly infuriated that this is, the feelings of, I can't believe this is still happening. Why isn't this better? And I'm so sorry you experienced this. And I think it's the hope that like what we've experienced is in a vacuum, and that it's not like a systemic problem, that it's not like a bigger issue. And what we found, unfortunately, is that it is a big issue. It's a very big issue. And you hit so many things along there. So there's a lot there to unpack and talk about. But first, thank you for sharing all of that. I know that's also not easy to share. I have been learning along the last 8+ years, sharing my own journey, like teasing out all these different pieces. So thank you for sharing all of that with us. And shout out to Annie. I just want to mention that too, because she's amazing. So what I love is I want to take like 4 steps backwards, and I want to talk about first your journey in your own food reactivity, and then I want to like shimmy us all the way to like kind of today. And so you have celiac, and for those who are listening who aren't familiar, celiac is a specific disorder in which the individual is reactive to a specific protein called gluten. And gluten is found in several grains. And so what's important to note here, that's a big misnomer people don't often understand, is that like gluten is one protein that makes up wheat. And wheat is made of many proteins. All of these grains are made of many, many, many proteins, and gluten happens to be one of them. And so gluten is the actual trigger, and many of these grains end up being something that elicits a response in these people because it makes up so many grains. And so that's kind of, it's like the analogy of like, a square is a rectangle, but a rectangle isn't a square kind of situation. So want to mention that. So tell us a little bit about like, when did you discover that you had celiac, and how did that diagnosis come about?
So my whole life, I always had GI issues. It's something that runs in my family. My family kind of, we're all over the place with our bathroom habits and all of the above. And for a while they were like, oh, you have, lactose intolerance. So my whole high school, I was not eating dairy, which is very hard when your friends are like going out and eating pizza and like, you're getting cheeseless pizza and like still don't feel well. And eventually, right after I graduated high school, I like really, really wasn't feeling well. So my mom was like, let's try a new GI doctor. So I was 17. I think that's how old when you are when you graduate high school. And I, went to this doctor and he was like, oh, let's just do some blood work and like, not a big deal. Okay, didn't tell me what he was testing for, just ran a full GI panel. Okay, great. And then I get a call that my blood test came back positive for celiac disease, which was not something that was new to me because my sister-in-law actually has celiac. So we, like, the family was very aware of it and we understood it. And I fully broke down in tears and panicked and cried because, like, I know how hard it is for her. And I was like, I can't, like, I don't have celiac, I can't do this. And then the next step of the diagnosis is to do an endoscopy. So I went in for the endoscopy, they came back with the results and they're like, oh, like your endoscopy doesn't show any damage to the intestines, so we can't officially diagnose you yet. But that's just where we're at. And then they were like, okay, so like you don't have celiac, go ahead and eat gluten. And then I left for a year abroad, away from my parents to a country that I like speak the language, but not fluently. And I got on the plane and I went and I got there and I was eating gluten and I was so sick. And I called my parents and I was like, I don't know what to do. So they called the GI doctor and he was like, if you're really that sick, it's very likely that just the endoscopy didn't show any damage yet. The blood work came back positive, and newer diagnostic criteria since that time has said that, if you have those antibodies and the blood work comes back positive, it is. So I navigated a year abroad in a country that I didn't really speak the language, with a new condition that I didn't really fully understand. And then I came home after a year and had to do it all over again because you find all the products that you like and and you enjoy, and then you move countries. So luckily, I kind of was able to find a lot of the products that are made by the same brand and sent, all over the world. There are like European brands that send to the Middle East, that send to America, that send to all of Europe, and like kind of all over the place. So I have that like broader knowledge of, oh, like, okay, that company makes this in this country, let me see if they make it here also. And then, experimenting and finding new products, and new recipes. Like I love, like I tell my friends this all the time when we like have meals together, I'm like, okay, like if you're cooking for me and you don't know what to use, like call me, I'll play around with it in the kitchen, and then like I'll send you the recipe once it's like gluten-free and perfected. So that's kind of my celiac journey.
So you go in, see the GI, get a positive blood test result, go through the entire process of a colonoscopy. Yes?
Endoscopy.
Of an endoscopy. Okay. So you go through an endoscopy.
Upper GI.
Also not fun.
Not fun.
go through that, they do not see basically like the damage that they're looking for. So for those who are listening who are not familiar, when you have celiac disease, several things are happening in the body. One is that there can be specific markers in the blood, there can be specific markers in the stool that indicate that the body is releasing this type of response to celiac specifically. Also, they will go and do a scope of some sort in order to make sure that like, oh yeah, we see the damage that we would see for celiac disease. And the downside to that is that, especially for those of us who are like navigating GI issues our whole stinking life, we may or may not be actively reactive to whatever the trigger food is. And there are a few things that are similar to this where like, in order for the test to come back positive, you have to be actively reactive, right? You have to be like actively doing the thing. One of them also is like mast cell activation syndrome, where like your body has to be responding often in order for the test to work. And so in this particular case, I can imagine how frustrating that must be to like, yeah, we have this test result. It shows that that's the thing, but like almost this weird gatekeeping of like, well, you're not bad enough is kind of what it sounds like. So you go overseas, you navigate this overseas because you are incredibly sick, right? And how fascinating it is to think about what a lot of our families that we work with navigate is they start removing things, right? Like they start removing things from their diet and then go back in for this testing, still not going to see that like level of response they're looking for, that threshold of being enough miserable, if you will. And that that's an awful threshold. I'll just like come out and say it, like for you just not to be sick enough. And for you to be like needing to actively consume things that make you miserable in order for you to get a diagnosis. Not fun. I can see like how incredibly valuable that experience would be though, to like go overseas. I know for me, like as I'm looking at labels, it's like label reading in the United States is so awful. And we talk about that sometimes on the platform, but like why it's so bad. And then you go to other countries and it's a just completely different ballgame. And so I can see how incredibly valuable that skill basically is that you have now of like, I have read labels in multiple countries, and I also have the ability to find free from, allergy friendly alternative options in other countries, right? And because that's hard for us. We're in the US, and for us to we offer consults globally. And so for somebody who comes to us and is like, yeah, I live in Australia, I live in UK, or wherever they may be coming to us from, it's harder for them, quite frankly, because our recommendations may not match exactly what they have available to them. So
it's also I've spoken with a lot of people that have a fear of traveling. Like they won't leave the state, they won't leave the country because they don't know if they can find safe foods. So that happens to be something that, because I learned overseas and then had to come back and do, like I really, I pack a good travel bag. Like we road trip a lot in this family, and our car is stocked with all of the free from, and research is done on where we can eat when we travel and all of these things. So it's not even just like people from abroad, but people here too. You still have to live a normal life, even if you or your child has some sort of free from diet.
Yep. And that's really common, right? When we're working with a parent who's in the throes of an elimination diet and they're like, we're going on vacation. We've been planning this for like 6 months. What am I supposed to do? So the ability then to be able to meet with you, to like game plan all of that, right? Like, this is what we need to pack. This is how much food for this many days. This is where we're stopping. These are like the friendly places. This is the friendly food that we can find at SeaWorld, right? Like, whatever it may be, there's a lot there. And you're right, like, life is still occurring, and the ability to like work around that with someone else who gets it, right? Not just the like, just don't eat the thing. Good luck with that, and off to the races. So I appreciate that, and I know that our families will really appreciate that too. And so you navigate celiac and having celiac disease, and then you and I know one of the questions that a lot of our followers ask is, is my child going to have this forever? And so for celiac disease, the answer to that is likely, right? So you will likely have celiac disease for the entirety of your life, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And so what's important to note there is the differences, right? The difference between like celiac versus you can also have a non-IgE mediated allergic response to wheat or to gluten, any of the proteins that make up wheat or the other grains, that can be outgrown, and or another slew of like all these other pathways in which this response can occur. And so that's kind of differentiation there, right? Like, if maybe we were to find out that like, yes, celiac is a part of our journey, that's likely a lifelong journey for your kiddo. If you find out that celiac's not a part of your journey, so it's not celiac and it's not an IgE-mediated food response, then you're likely in the realm of something that could be outgrown as they get older. So talking then about like shifting from that experience then to, okay, now I am a registered dietitian, right? So like, and I relate so much to your story about like, I ended up in this class and then like, this is actually really cool. It's not even what I like thought it was gonna be. It didn't even do the thing that I wanted it to do for my credits, but like, this is really amazing. And huge kudos to you for leaning into that, because that can be scary when like you already have a different like path in mind. And so making that shift. So huge kudos. And then like just following that. And I have a similar journey. Like in my undergrad, I was in the mindset of like one specific pathway with the biology degree. And then I had my first experience doing research, doing like just a little bit of cancer research in a paid internship. And I was like, this is where it's at. I love this. This is amazing. And then being like, nope, this is my personality now. this is who I am. We're going this way. Which then like now leading on to my own food allergy journey and starting a whole stinking company. So as you worked on becoming a registered dietitian then, so for those who are curious, so full coursework, right? And then basically a test at the end to receive that like certification officially, correct? Like, tell us a little bit about what does it take to become an RD?
So you have full undergrad coursework. My program was 75 credits, some are more, some are less. And you learn everything from, organic chemistry and microbiology to what makes a muffin puff up and how an egg burns. The class varies like crazy. There were days that I was going again from the lab, mixing chemicals to how to properly set a table. So broad scope. And then within that time of undergrad, you also have to complete volunteer work. Usually about 500 hours. Some programs require more, some programs require less. And then you have to do a dietetic internship, which starting 2024, you're not going to be able to do until you already have a master's. So, even more education is going to be required to get that title of RD. But I did not have to do the master's. So I went into a clinically based dietetic internship, which is 1,200 hours. That is the standard across the country from the Academy of Nutrition Dietetics and the accreditation organization. And then once you complete that internship, then you're eligible to take the exam. And the exam is not easy. And is one of those tests that kind of like changes based on how you answer questions. So you really have to know everything.
Yeah.
And then once you pass the exam, then you're a registered dietitian, which is what makes an RD different than just a nutritionist. Anyone can call themselves a nutritionist, but in order to become a registered dietitian, you have to go through all of this schooling and all of this hands-on experience to make sure that you are trained properly to do this.
So in the realm of all that, first of all, I didn't realize that like those are all of the things that it takes to become a registered dietitian, but also like the scope of the like classes that you took and whatnot. That's fascinating. It's always so fascinating to hear like the different like career pathways and like the obstacles that we have to jump over in order to achieve them. So that is incredible. And then on the like food allergy side of things, right? So you have your own kiddo, you deal with like this packaged baby, right? Which isn't uncommon, where we're like, all right, anatomical issues, and then exclusive pumping, and just like it feels like we're just like stacking on top like another thing and another thing. And exclusive pumping is no freaking joke.
No joke.
So if you are listening and you are an exclusive pumper, my bra's off to you. Holy moly, is so much work. You are feeding a pump, you are feeding a baby, it is so much work. And oof. So on top of that, being on an elimination diet, right? So already having gluten removed from your diet for a long time. Now you're in the realm of like, okay, now I also am removing cow's milk protein. So you meet with Free to Feed and you start talking about a reintroduction strategy and like, how do we navigate getting these things in to see like, are you still in the midst of this food or activity? Has baby outgrown it, right? Which is always it's important. It's so very important. And I think this is a good time to mention that to families, that like the goal is never ever to have you on an elimination diet forever. It's just not. The goal is to pinpoint what baby's reactivity is, have those specific known triggers removed from your diet for a specific period of time, and then bring them back, because baby is likely going to outgrow them. And we're not removing things for funsies, because it's not fun, first of all, and it's not necessary. And so it can be very helpful, from what I found, to work one-on-one with one of our consultants, because you can talk through like those nuances for your specific journey of like, how long is it going to take for a reaction to occur? When should I start getting this stuff in? How do I get it in, right? Like how much and what form? Do I do baked? Do I do yogurt, right? I'm not ready to just give them a glass of milk yet. How do I navigate all of that? And then how do I determine whether or not it's a pass or a fail, right? Because babies are confusing. We've got teething and illnesses, and they went outside and ate dirt, right? Like, how do I tell? So the ability to, in our reintroduction discussions, we always like build a full strategy, right? Like, this is the way, this is all the answers to all those questions. And then you execute, and we're kind of in the background, like cheering you on and answering questions as you go. Tell us a little bit about your journey as it relates to like, okay, got these foods in, and you said baby's now food allergy free, yay, which is amazing. So tell us a little bit about like, did you do direct introduction? How did that process go for you?
So because I was exclusively pumping, it was a little bit more complicated with the timing, and like Annie was incredible, like helping me figure out what bags to label with what and all my timing and things like that. But I also at that point had started giving formula, giving like a hypoallergenic formula because I was exclusively pumping and not eating gluten and not eating dairy and also starting work. It was like a lot of things stacked on top of each other. And I also I really thank Free to Feed for allowing myself the permission to, give formula, because as a dietitian and as a lactation counselor, I'm like, I know the benefits of breast milk. I'm like, I really should push myself to do it. But also mental health, so important. If you're not 100%, you can't get there for your baby. You got to feed yourself first, and then you can feed whatever. So I spoke with Annie, and we were went through the reintroduction ladders, and we were doing direct reintroduction. My son was 10 months old at the time. So we went, he was, fully eating all of the foods. And we started very slow on the ladders. We were going up every step as opposed to choosing a side, because I was, first time mommy, very nervous.
Yeah.
And, step one, totally fine. Did great. Then he started school. And then, is this rash a reaction?
All the viruses.
A virus. So lots of back and forth, lots of support all day, every day from Annie for a very long time. But at a certain point, my husband was like, he's okay. You need to just speed up the ladders a little bit. So then we started going, every other. And we held off fully on straight cow's milk until he turned a year. But thank God everything was fine. And having the ladder and having the support was so calming for me as a mom, because I had a plan and I had a strategy and I had the support, and I had more than just my husband being like, he's fine. Obviously it's great to have that support, but dads are dads, and oh, he's fine, whatever. But just the community behind it also is just incredible and calming, and every mom needs it,
Yep.
Allergy or non-allergy, every mom needs that.
Oh man, yes, definitely that. So one of the things that you mentioned that I want to come back to is the discussion of the mental health aspect and formula feeding. And so as we're working with families, one of the things that's very, very important to me is that we help families no matter what their feeding modality. We are agnostic, you do you, boo boo. I'm here to cheer you on, give you the information that you need to make the best choices for your family. And there's so much to unpack as it relates to a food allergy journey, and the mental health aspect is just one of those many things. And there's a balance to be had, right? There's a balance to be had between all of those things, right? That going back to work, the supply, the elimination diet, the stress upon stress upon stress, on top of symptomology, right? My baby is uncomfortable. My baby is dealing with all of these issues. There's a balance. And when that scale tips for families, because oftentimes when they do come to us, it is because they want to continue their breastfeeding journey. And we support that 110%. And when the family gets to the point of hey, that balance is tipping for me right now, the couple of things that I think is so incredibly valuable to understand is that one, that scale for you is going to change over time, right? When you start out, it's going to look different than when you're 2 months into an elimination diet and you're if I don't eat a piece of cheese, I'm going to stab somebody in the eyeball, right? And to be able to talk to somebody that says that's okay it would be weird if you didn't feel that way, right? Like to support you in that. And so to know that like one, the scale will change over time and that's okay. And two, I think what's really interesting that probably isn't talked enough about in this journey too is that like even the knowledge that there is a hypoallergenic formula that is an option for you can relieve a lot of anxiety.
Yes.
So and sometimes for some of us it can also create anxiety because as we're trialing these formulas we may struggle to find one that is a pass, and that might cause more issues. We may find that we're kind of painted into a corner. In a way though, for some of the families that I've worked with, like that's also a little bit of a relief of like, I'm not doing this for naught, that this is something I have to do, right? That little bit of like resolve, like, okay, yeah, this is where I'm at. This is my journey. However, for most families, we can find a hypoallergenic formula that is an option. And so for some, especially if we're in one of those journeys that's very, very stressful, we're just enougher, right? That kind of situation, we may trial a formula just so we can feel confident in like, if I stepped off the curb and broke my leg and needed surgery, I know that everything's gonna be okay back at home because there's something.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's stressful, right? The probability that I'm gonna like last minute find a human that's on my specific weird elimination diet is lower in the last minute, right? So one, that is something that we do a lot at Free to Feed is to talk through like, that's okay. It's okay. And it's normal. And you did not in any way, shape or form fail or is less than. Otherwise, for switching to a formula, trialing a formula, or any combo in between, any amount of time that you've spent breastfeeding, pumping like a mad woman, on an elimination diet is absolutely freaking amazing and insane. And a vast majority of the population would never. So yes, 100% on board for all of the above. And I think that that's really important because unfortunately, in the food allergy space and in the lactation space, it can feel very exclusive, right? Where like, oh yeah, you're in this space that's for food allergies, but you can't talk about formula. Okay, well, formula is a very important part of the food allergy journey. Sometimes we end up in like kiddos on GI tubes that all they can have is formula, right? And now all of a sudden I'm not allowed in this space with you anymore. Because of circumstance. And circumstance is what got me here in the first place. So just want to take a moment to say, like, for anyone who's listening, who's navigated that, like, you're doing an amazing job and not less than in any way, shape, or form for having the journey that you have, right? So as you then bring these foods back, the other thing that you mentioned that I love is you talked about like comfort, right? Like comfortability. Am I comfortable? And knowing that you're not on anybody's timeline, right? It's not uncommon for families to feel like this. And I know I felt it too, kind of this like rush, this like, why are you doing it already? You should have done it already, especially as it relates to people talking about early enough in introduction, things like that. Like that you are wrong for not going faster, being faster, doing more. When in reality, a lot of the data like doesn't support that like shenanigans that we're telling parents that like, oh my gosh, if you didn't get it in right now, it's the end of the world. Like, no, it's okay. It's going to be okay. And to give you that like grace of like, yeah, do it when you're ready. And you're gonna have these hiccups. You're gonna have the, you know, your kiddo came home with an illness. You're gonna have the they just popped a tooth and we're traveling and right? Like, I don't want to trial a food while we're on vacation. No, thank you. That sounds awful. So all to say that like it can be really helpful to have that person be like, yeah, it's okay for you to take 2 weeks off. Yeah, take a pause. That's perfectly fine. It's gonna be okay. And also the thing that I think we don't do a good enough job at talking about at Free to Feed is that like extra support that we do offer, right? So that like after you got done with your consult with Annie and you built this plan, right? Like you have an actionable, and it's not just there's a huge difference between going to someone and them saying like, give your baby cow's milk, and then being shimmied out the door, and being given like an actual plan. This is how much, and this is the goal, and we're going to talk about like, how do you want to do it based on this data and science, and then build it with you with a real actionable plan. But the thing that I don't think we talk enough about is that after you get done with that, you are connected to your food allergy expert, so you can ask them questions as you go, so that if you have, you know, step one and you're like, what is this rash on their face, and literally send them a picture of that rash and be like, what are your thoughts?
So many pictures. So many pictures. All of the pictures.
I have the world's largest collection of stool photos in the world. I'm fairly certain of it now. It's something that I should put in for like Guinness World of Records or something. So yes, all of the pictures, right? Because it would be, and this is one thing that I hear often from parents too, is like, I don't know what normal is, right? I don't know what to expect. And the shame around that's shouldn't be so, right? Like it would be weird if you knew what like normal baby poop was supposed to look like. If you haven't experienced, like if you haven't grown up around a bunch of babies, right? I didn't. Right. I would be more worried about you then. Like, why do you know this? That's weird. Or if you knew how much spit up was normal, if you knew what baby skin, everything that baby skin was supposed to do, even if you've had 4 babies, especially if you haven't navigated the type of food allergy that you are with this particular baby, like it would be weird if you did know those things. So the ability
even if you do, even if you are, you know, in that professional world, you are a dietitian, you are a lactation consultant, you are a pediatrician, any of these things, when it's your baby, it's a totally different story.
Yes.
So you can have all the knowledge in the world. That doesn't mean that your mom knowledge and your, you know, professional knowledge are the same thing, because
are compatible.
They're not. They're not the same.
I feel that in my soul. It makes me think of like when my oldest was born and we're navigating her food allergies. Literally my whole job was studying proteins. That's what I did for a living, all day, every day in a lab, study proteins. And in that time when I was told at the hospital that something that I consumed would stay in my breast for weeks on end, I never questioned it then. Even though like put me in a science lab, put my lab coat on, like there's no way in hell I would have been like, oh, okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. I would have been like, no, let's go dig into the research, show me proof. Where does it show that doesn't even make sense, like physiologically? I would have dug in, but as a parent with a baby who's crying her little face off, who's bleeding profusely, whose skin is infected, I was like, okay, got it, heard, gotta go pump like a mad woman for 2 weeks and put my breast milk away and hope that she can get back to the breast. Those two humans like did not interact with each other during this time. And it wasn't until years later that they did, where like those two brains came together and was like, wait a second, that doesn't make any sense. So yeah, you hit it right on the head of like, yeah, even if this is what you do. And that's one of the fascinating things. And to talk about like many of the families that we work with, the mom, the parent is a professional. We've helped pediatricians, we've helped registered dietitians, we've helped IBCLCs, all types of backgrounds professionally. And I think part of it is the surprise of like, why hasn't there been more like knowledge and education here? And I think another part of it is that like, you know that this isn't normal, right? Like I know this isn't normal. And even when I get, told otherwise elsewhere, like, yeah, there's something wrong here. I think that's what brings a lot of professionals to us to say like, okay, teach me the science now, teach me the education, the class about this, because it hasn't been taught to me yet. So I really appreciate that too. So with that, you now have a kiddo who is eating all the things, so, which is like free feeding, absolutely game changing for those of you who get there, and for those of you who don't, my heart goes out to you. You are forever likely navigating celiac disease yourself, and now you are a part of the Free to Feed team. And so we are so incredibly honored to bring your expertise to our families. And one of the number one places that we see your expertise so incredibly valuable is in making sure that the parent's diet is nutritionally sound, right? Like, is that person getting in all the nutrients they need to make sure that their milk is nutritionally complete, make sure their body is nutritionally complete? Because as you mentioned, that feed yourself, right? We need to feed ourselves. It is so much work to be in the midst of all of this very stressful situation and be deficient in nutrients. And that really piles on, right? That really piles on to all of the other issues that you're dealing with. So I see that being incredibly valuable, on top of legitimately helping parents pinpoint what their triggers are, right? The detective work, as internally we like to call it often, how do I help a parent confirm or rule out that food is a part of their journey, and then pinpoint exactly what the triggers are. And you've navigated this, and that's one of the most valuable things that I see, is the empathy to say I know how much it sucks to
I really get you. Fully understand what you feel.
Yes. Yeah. When someone's I'm so jealous of my best friend who just eats whatever the hell she wants, right? In my soul, I understand where you're coming from, and you're never ever going to get any judgment from me for anything that comes out of your mouth, because I get it. So with that, is there anything that we didn't hit on that you would love to chat with the group?
So just in addition to the, understanding the gluten-free diets, the dairy-free diets, the, general nutrition understanding and knowledge, I also am an Orthodox Jew, so I keep kosher. So I have, that understanding of kosher diets, and not anecdotally, but kind of as an aside, halal diets, they often kind of work together. So I think, that is something that can definitely be helpful, because I know there are a lot of other moms out there that do keep kosher and are I'm just going to give formula, because none of the options that I see out there are, kosher and free of this, or kosher and free of that, or kosher and free of all of the things, which it isn't true. You have to have someone there to be able to help you, and know the free from foods, and be oh, this one happens to be kosher, this one happens to be halal. So I'm really excited to be able to help more people with religious dietary restrictions on top of their allergy or medical dietary restrictions, kind of navigate the process. That, and also, we didn't really touch on any of the, medical conditions besides for celiac, but, no one is 100%, healthy 100% of the time. So whether that's a chronic disease that you're dealing with, whether you have a heart condition, or it's, I have the flu and I'm dehydrated, those are all things that, as a registered dietitian, I have been trained to, manage. And we can work on low sodium diets on top of your elimination diet, and we can work on, maintaining, this specific nutrient if you're low in iron, and we can work on getting those iron-rich foods in, but also we're eliminating, beef. So what do we do, So I think, the combination of all of those things, I know for myself, I'm really excited about this, because I'm really excited to get to help all these families navigate all these issues. and know that I'm helping. This is very selfish of me, but know that I'm helping all these littles to, live littles and mommies live happier, healthier lives. That's like, why I went into this field. And I am incredibly, incredibly honored that I have the opportunity to do it with Free to Feed.
One, I think that's the opposite of selfish. Feed all the babies, all the healthy babies. Two, I thank you for bringing up the kosher and halal. I have worked with many families who have religious dietary restrictions, and I don't have any experience other than like in food manufacturing, right? So I've worked in food manufacturing, so I've experienced like what the audits look like for, kosher audits and halal audits. So I know of it. But yeah, when I've worked with families and they're like, well, is that kosher? And I have to be like, oh crap, I don't know. Hold on, let me look. So having somebody who has lived that and knows the ins and outs is so incredibly valuable for our family. So thank you for that. It feels like an expansion of our abilities that we haven't really tapped into. So thank you for that. And with that, I want to tell everybody that they can now book with you. So if you go to freetofeed.com/consults, you can book with Free to Feed. And so she's available, book with her, and to know that you deserve that. You deserve the support and love and empathy throughout your journey. And you deserve to have the science on your side. You deserve to know exactly what's going on in your body and baby's body, because just as you mentioned, there's two different things happening in two different bodies. And oftentimes, more often than not, there's something going on in the lactating parent's journey too, right? Some kind of disorder, disease, food reactivity themselves, all of that. Navigating both together, you are not less than for having more help there and for advocating for your baby and for advocating for their health. So huge kudos to you. Welcome and thank you for this wonderful conversation. For anybody who's listening, wherever you are in your journey today, you're doing an incredible job. I'm so very proud of you.